Well, hello to Eastlake, everybody who's listening and watching. This is Kristen, and I'm here with Peter.
Hey, everybody.
And we're going to be continuing our kind of what we've been talking about, which is rituals and how we have meaningful ones in our life. But first, I just wanted to acknowledge that this is the first recording that we've done since we made a little announcement, right?
Yeah, it's true. If you missed that, it might be important. It is important to go back and watch that, right? We had an announcement that we're coming to the home stretch of Eastlake, and this is the final kind of chapter, but we are excited to keep some discussions going. We have more to say, but we also wanted to kind of get the cat out of the bag and say, here's our plan to wrap up Eastlake. Hopefully you heard from the message. I know that Kristen and I have poured over this and like how to say this and what do we want to say. And we're just so thankful for this past, at least I'm so thankful. I know you are too, Kristen, but I don't want to speak on your behalf. But I'm just saying that what a beautiful chapter. This last decade's been, I'm like a totally different human than I was a decade ago. And we're even going to talk about that today. But yeah, for those of you that maybe are tuning in and just been following the podcasts or videos and you didn't watch the announcement, didn't get the email, you've unsubscribed or whatever, you're going to want to check that one out.
Yeah. Well, and just before we hit record, we were talking about the upcoming messages that we're going to record and film, and I'm excited about them. I think it's going to be,
yeah.
We kind of have two more of these kind of ritual discussions, and the second one kind of ties into the end of Eastlake, and then we're going to have some reflections on Eastlake to kind of wrap up, and it's going to be great.
I've already written down some of my takeaways, and I have to go back to my like 28-year-old brain and be like, oh my gosh, some of my notes. I can't wait to share some of those stories too.
It's going to be so fun. Some of the stories, man. Okay. Anyway, today,
yes, today
we're going to be talking about aging and birthdays.
Let's
which
go.
I'm excited about. Peter's birthday is in September, so happy birthday.
That's the primary reason, really, we're recording today.
I don't know if
celebrate
I can
birthday month.
I know. Can I ship cider to you? I don't know. Can
please.
you do that? Is there...
I can just drive over and grab it. Whatever you buy, I'll drive. I'll be over.
But Peter is turning another year older in September. So
39.
we thought 39?
39.
Next year's going to be so fun. So we thought we would use that as kind of a jumping off point to talk about aging and the gift of getting older and what kind of rituals we bring into our life surrounding that idea, and maybe which ones, maybe some new ones that we actually want to focus on as we kind of look at our life from this point forward. So I guess I wanted to start off by asking you, what are your plans? What do you do to celebrate birthdays in the Gadd household? And maybe yours is different than Marshall's, but like, what are you going to do to celebrate?
That's good. It's been a funny conversation over the 17, Brittany and I just had 17-year wedding anniversary, September 1st. And it's funny to like think through even the early stages of our marriage with birthdays, because I've always been a birthday guy. I've always been like wanting to celebrate it. Even if it was like we had a couple friends over and mom let me have Reese's peanut butter cups all day, every day, like that whole day. But like as a kid, I got like, there were just some things that my mom did that made me feel really special. And I think I've always just like probably had a little bit of a positivity, like I'm so special skew to my life anyways, even that's this delusion. But like she let us pick the meal out, and she let us like go to pick out the Baskin Robbins cake, or like we get to like make our little choices. It wasn't like a crazy thing, but it just made me feel like it was so special. So anyways, we get married, and Brittany, when we get married, I had a job like lined up, right? This is 21-year-old Pete, and she was already employed with like a real company and like had like a 401k started, and like she was like responsible, and I was fully on riding coattails. And it was my birthday, and we were living in this little apartment for like 30 days before we moved, and she was finishing up her job and like working, and we woke up and she's like, happy birthday today. And I was just like, what's going on? Like, what's the plan for the day? And she's like, I'm working. I'm like paying for this apartment that you live in. Like she didn't say that, but like that's where she's at in her life and in her perspective. And she didn't have a gift for me or anything, and I was so like my feelings were hurt so bad because she didn't have a gift. So she like swings by at lunch to like grab this stinking gift for me and brings it home from like 'cause she could tell that I was like, oh, I needed more from her than she was probably planning on. So anyways, now it's funny. At the time it was so hurtful and tragic that she didn't acknowledge me on my birthday because she was busy paying for our entire life. But how we celebrate it, Brittany now, we kind of like figured out that I like to just kind of have some freedom on my birthday. And so I'm taking a couple of days off of work. I'm going to visit a couple of different buddies. I'm doing some rounds of golf. And this year, historically, we usually spend time together as a family. It's like on my actual birthday, we're going to like just hang. It's on a Sunday. So I'm probably watching football. My kids make me a bunch of art. They always draw me something and make me feel like I'm the greatest dad ever, which is the best. So it's usually pretty low key, but always some freedom to kind of choose my own adventure. It's kind of how we've landed on the best is like, what do you want to do to feel celebrated? And Brittany gives me that freedom, which is nice. So
We I love that Brittany was like, I have nothing.
I
got
don't have a
nothing.
gift for you. Looks like you need a gift, huh? Okay, we'll go get you one.
My son's birthday is the first week of October. So I'm like a little bit behind on oh yeah, let's plan something. But we're definitely at that stage where like birthday parties are so like treasured and important.
Yes.
And we, thankfully have a great community of people, but there's lots of birthday parties on the calendar and
yeah.
But I like it. I think it's really good for my kids to focus on someone else. Like I like taking them shopping for gifts for their friends because of course, my one of my kids in particular is like, oh, but I want that. Like I really want that. And it's this whole process of like coming outside of yourself to think about someone else and be grateful for that friendship. So I think it's really good for kids to both be celebrated and reminded of how special they are, and also to celebrate others
totally
when it's not their turn. So
yeah, it's fun this year. So with the 4 kids, we have all the birthdays are within 6 weeks. So it's like just a birthday fest for this like window, including Brittany's. So there's 5 birthdays within 6 weeks in our world, and for the last couple of years, it's been really hard on my oldest son because his is the last birthday. So he's just literally like waiting as all his siblings get celebrated, have parties, have friends over. And this year it was really cool to kind of go back to what you're saying is like he's been through it enough to know that he's going to be celebrated and he's going to get his day. And he was actually able to even enjoy his brother's birthday party and like enjoy the process of giving a gift to his brother. And I think that is hard. You have to like learn that, like that's not natural for a kid. So, anyways, it only took to age 9 for him to finally enjoy another birthday party other than his own.
My daughter is like the day after her birthday. She's like, next year, I wanted it's like
totally.
an all year long thing.
Planning.
Yeah. But awesome. I just feel like in general, birthday celebrations are like any other ritual that we have in our life, which is just they're designed to remind us of something, to like mark time, to stop and like look around and take a little inventory. Like you're older, you're different than you were this time 1 year ago. And I think I'm a big fan of creating rituals and like been trying to do that this year as we've been talking about, but I'm really thankful for the birthday, like the cultural celebration of someone being alive. I think it's really valuable and I'm grateful for it.
Me too. I was thinking about that one with approaching 40 specifically because there's some negative connotations with aging, right? In general, like like even if you think culturally, right? Like anti-aging cream, or like I'm supposed to never get. I'm feeling KB. I'm supposed to like make sure that I'm like I never lose my hair, even though like I know it's coming. I can see my dad. I can see the future, But like, at what point do you accept it? And it feels like there's this like tension at some level within culture of like, when do you accept? Like Brittany, in the last couple of years, like just decided my hair's gray. And I'm not gonna keep like dyeing it in my roots all the time every 6 weeks. I'm gonna embrace the gray. So it's interesting to think. I know it's beautiful, but
It's beautiful.
I think it's just kind of an interesting thing culturally because we kind of haven't decided. It feels like it varies by era or
Hmm.
um, just your internal community. Like, to what degree are we okay with aging versus trying to be an age that is like the glory years of the past, right?
Yeah.
So it's just kind of interesting to think about that because I don't know. Typically, the older you get, there's a little bit more freedom when it comes like hopefully time freedom, maybe some more like loosen the belt financially, a bit less money stress. I certainly feel less of that than I did when I was 21, right?
Mhm.
Still money stress, but just different money stress. Anyway, so like there's benefits to getting older, but at the same time, we sometimes try to go backwards to like the glory years of looking a certain way or feeling in better shape. And I'm feeling that now. I'm almost 40, and I'm like, ooh, I like trying to keep up with my son, and I'm like, I have to like work out in order to just keep up with the 10-year-old running around. Like
Mhm.
that's kind of sucks. Um, but I
Do you
think it's
feel like
it's interesting just culturally,
do you feel like that's shifting culturally?
meaning that we're getting more comfortable with aging.
Hmm.
It's a good question. It's I think it's hard because of like my algorithm, right? Like everybody's
Hmm.
got their algorithm and they're like in their own little world. So if you're in the world where that's embraced and accepted, um, I think you could. I think yes and no. I don't
Hmm.
know.
I think
That's hard still.
in my algorithm, the world that I'm in, I'm a 43-year-old woman, and all of my algorithms know that. So I'm seeing lots of things about perimenopause and gray hair. And I don't know, maybe it's
Right,
the people that I follow, but I do feel like there's um I appreciate that I'm seeing celebrities going gray and
right,
embracing um their experience in the
right.
world. I think about that sometimes. I think about well, currently I think I'm thinking about like, what kind of job am I going to go get after
Yeah,
this?
yeah,
And it's so interesting because I'm like, I'm not young, but don't feel old. And I've been trying to figure out how to translate like the East Lake experience into like language that
yeah.
um is appropriate on a resume or clear on a resume. But anyways, I just have been thinking of like all of the experience that I have accumulated over the course of my adulthood so far, the jobs that I've had, the relationships I've had, the things that I've been required to do. Um, and if I'm being honest, I'm like, wow, I've done a lot. And I'm
Totally.
thankful in these 43 years that I've learned what I have.
Yeah,
And hopefully I can continue to put that to use. But I think I'm just in a stage where I'm like, I mean, my sister my sisters are older than me, and we have this chat about, hormones and which doctors we're seeing, and so many jokes going back and forth. And I think I'm just in a stage where I feel really thankful to consider it an honor
yeah,
to be aging.
yeah. I agree. So from like, do I think culture is more accepting of aging? I don't know. I know for me personally, I don't want to go back to age 21. Good God, no. Right? Like at the time, I thought that was the coolest age to be, and then 31, I'm like, I wouldn't have wanted to go back to 21 at 31, and I wouldn't want to go back to 31 now. So in some ways, I think that is, I mean, maybe the goal of even why you would say on your birthday or at least nearby, we should be reflecting and like, am I living the life that I want to live?
Mhm.
And what can I do to make my future to like make choices that will so that in a decade I can look back and say I'm in a better spot than I was now, right? I think that's
Yeah.
kind of like the hope, right? Is that we're constantly tinkering with our choices and options so that we can have that the next decade can be better than the one that you're in, right? Um, but yeah, I do enjoy aging. I feel like part of it, I wonder when that like hill might happen, right? Like
Mhm.
that's what I'm supposed to be over the hill. And I was even just looking up in response to this, like prepping for this kind of discussion that we're going to have. But did you know the average lifespan in the year 1800? Let's go back 200 years. The average human on planet Earth, you know how long they live?
No idea.
35 years is the average lifespan,
Um,
just 200 years ago. So in terms of like, do we have anything to be thankful for? Right. I'm halfway, hypothetically, statistically, like there's also a map I looked at just lifespan in the US, which varies by what state you live in, and obviously 1,000 factors, including genetic ones that are completely out of your control. However, in Washington state, it's getting close to 80 is the lifespan. So right now I'm like halfway through my life, basically.
mhm.
I'm an average person, which I like to think myself is close to average, maybe slightly above. And just thinking like 200 years ago, had I happened to join the planet, I'd probably be dead by now. It's crazy to think
Yeah.
about, but like the entire map of the world, it didn't vary by any country. All of the Earth's lifespan was 35 or less. And to think now that you can kind of plan on 80, 75, 80 is insane. And just like so much to be grateful for because of that,
Yeah.
the privilege of aging, as you're speaking to.
Yeah. I highlighted from that book that we've been reading for small creatures such as we, this thing that she wrote about birthdays. She said, it's this rejoicing at survival that's at the heart of every birthday party. For most of history, survival was harder. Children perished. A first birthday was not a given. Each
Yeah.
passing year, each step closer to adulthood was a relief, not to be taken for granted, something truly worthy of celebration. That's what a birthday is, the realization that time is passing, but we are still alive.
Right. Yeah. That's why I want, hopefully, I know that there's reasons that birthdays can be hard, but that's why I do think there's always something to be thankful for. And birthdays can hopefully be a trigger to like think through what can I be grateful for? Like you're starting another lap around the sun. We use that language in our family a lot. Like whenever my son, my daughter turns 11, I'm like, you're starting your 12th lap around the sun, right? Your first lap started on day one, and now you're starting your 12th lap. Like, what do you want this lap to look like, right? Um, but to think that I don't know, I think there's always something to be grateful for because we're surviving, right? I was thinking about that with even like our family has 4 kids, and Tess was like the first kid we had. Brittany had to have a C-section, and Tess was breech, and like again, born at a different time, different place, that
Mhm.
could be life threatening, right? And like childbirth in and of itself not being life threatening as much in our country for children, and then also for mothers, is a massive leap forward in terms of just the ability to survive, and so much to be grateful for.
Yeah, still a ways to go there too, but I feel that same way. My first birthing experience was awful and probably wouldn't have survived, 100 years ago. So, I think that brings me to one of the points that I was interested in. I was reading about birthday traditions around the world, and the one that I highlighted was a Korean tradition, and it says that seaweed soup was eaten by Korean mothers to aid in their postpartum recovery. And
Mm-hmm.
so there's a tradition now that people eat seaweed soup on their birthdays to honor their mothers, the ones who brought them into the world. Um, and I remember that about JB's first birthday. I was like, this kid has no idea what's happening. But man, have I been through a lot the last year.
Totally. We're gonna throw a party for what I pulled off. You're here, brother.
Yeah. And I know like mother and father relationships can be super complicated, but I feel like, and I kind of joke around with my parents. In the past, I've joked around on my birthday, like, thanks for having me. Um, and this doesn't work for everyone, but for me, I think um, the older I get, the more I want to just honor the fact that my parents gave me a life and that it's not a small thing. Um, and even more so, I want to honor my parents on my birthdays. I want to do that better rather than just joking around.
Yeah.
And I even remember my mom tells a story about how, so I'm the third child, and after the second pregnancy did not go well. And um so they had like major decisions about, do we even try to do this again?
Yeah.
And she tells me that when she told my grandma that she was pregnant with me, my grandma was like, why would you do that? Like, mad. Why would you make this
Mm.
choice? Um, and I think about all the choices that people make. And granted, some people don't make the choice to have kids, and they do. And not everything is planned. Um, but I've spent a lot of time in prepping for this conversation, just thinking about the reality of like how important our choices are. And to take it even further, to think through like the choices that my ancestors made, like all of the decisions that went into having certain people be in certain places at certain times, that led to this child being born, which then led to other decisions. Like I think about my mom's family. My mom was born in New York, and they made the decision to move to Seattle, like sight unseen. My grandma got on a train with her three kids in New York and took a
Crazy.
train to Seattle so that my mom and dad could meet in high school. Like this,
Yeah.
that kind of processing honestly causes me a little bit of panic because I'm like, what if
Totally.
this and this and this didn't happen? And I can stop myself sometimes, mostly from going down there, but like to also then be like, wow, what an amazing alignment of
Yeah.
reality that I'm even here.
Yes. Like
And
the
sometimes,
luck or the fate or the purpose,
yes,
whatever story we say, it's astounding.
it's astounding. And I'm not sure we think about that every day when we like get up and make the coffee and start folding the laundry after the kids go to school and get to work and check our emails and all of those things. But birthdays are a moment to stop and to be like, it's astounding that I'm a human being and I have
Yeah.
this life. And there's always hard things, and some things may be harder than others, but I think there's room for a moment there at least of like, wow.
Wonder. Yeah. A little wonder and awe.
Mhm.
Yeah. All the sliding doors moments of what if my parents hadn't met. Brittany and I talked about this a ton with the fact that we met when we did. We talked about our fourth child,
Yeah.
Bennett, and how he was we were hoping for it was a chance at a second daughter, right? We love our firstborn daughter so much. We're like, you know what, we got two boys. Let's go see if we can have our
Oh,
second daughter and go two and two. And we wound up with our third son, and we love him dearly.
that's
Um, but like he exists because he had an awesome sister, and we're like, let's gotta have another one of her. And I even think about I mean, I'm the sixth kid. If
you're
you
the
think about
sixth.
like if my parents got to four kids and decided, yep, we're gonna like to how many I have, and they're like, we're gonna keep going. Which I'm like, that is the biggest miracle of all, right? That they landed on having so the number of kids that where I get to join the planet and I get to experience all, yes, some of the pain that you mentioned. I think it is probably a people listening, right? Like birthdays do trigger challenging things too, right? Like my wife's grandma right now, right? Like it's hard to celebrate her birthday because her husband isn't here, right? So I understand that sometimes there's an emotional component of like anniversaries and birthday celebrations can trigger grief
Mhm.
too. But
Absolutely.
I think going back to your wonder piece, like the fact that we get to be here and that I got to experience, yes, some of the pain, but so much joy is like such a gift. Going back to life as a gift and love is the point, right? That's like I think that's one of the big points of even these rituals, is to help us reflect and at least find one thing to be thankful for and being born
Hmm.
and all the different stuff that had to go right for you to be born. At least when I think about my story, I'm like, there's of billions and billions of families that I would never have joined the planet out of. So, but here I am.
I know. I also like I said, I can create a little bit of panic for myself when I think about like I almost went to a different university and I remember thinking
Yeah.
about what a decision that was. And I remember talking to my dad about it. I'm like, I wouldn't have had these friends and I wouldn't like, who knows if I would have
Mhm.
come back to Seattle and all this stuff. And my dad's like, you would have met good friends there and you would have been saying the same thing about them. And I'm like, but it's these ones that I love. And Andy and I sometimes talk about how like if I would have gone to California, could we still have met somehow? Like we talk through our connections and like
Mhm.
and Andy does the same thing. He's like, you would have met someone else and you would have had kids with him and you would have been like, I can't imagine what if I hadn't had these. Like,
Totally.
I guess I appreciate that perspective, but I also um just get overwhelmingly grateful for the points in the story where I turned this way or that way and ended up here.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I think going back to gratitude for your parents, obviously there's varying stories about healthy families and not healthy families, but winding up in a place where you can at least kind of have freedom to live a life that you want to live. And having kids, I think, brings more awareness of all that they did to make it possible for me to at least have a foundation of ethics, a foundation of a worldview that could embrace gratitude, right? Some power to go make choices. Like those things are such privileges. And I think it is good to acknowledge that on your birthday, recognizing. I think I have more gratitude for my parents the longer I've been a parent. Like, hey, you guys work pretty hard for our family, and thanks for what you've done to make it possible.
Yeah.
I was listening. When you shared a podcast with me about mental health and the Huberman podcast, and the guy was talking about like what do humans need to live a healthy life and to kind of at least be able to experience happiness on a regular basis, right? So happiness isn't a constant state by any means, but how do we experience it more often? And the two things that this guy boiled all of his work down to were agency
Mm.
and gratitude.
Mm.
Agency and gratitude. And I was thinking about that even in like how I was raised, like being able to access agency and gratitude and the definitions of agency. I wrote them down because I thought it was kind of interesting. But agency just means basically like the ability to act and influence your life is what agency means. Like, and I think some of that has to be some of it, a little bit of a worldview too, right? Because like basically it means that you see the world through the lens that I have power to influence my life and I'm not stuck.
Mm.
Like I have some power to do something in my life. And I think obviously everybody's situation is different and there can be really, really restrictive situations where you don't have a ton of agency. Um, but for many, there are things that we can do um, to kind of influence our situation and make it improve if we were to make certain set of choices or consistent choices. So I like that as like kind of a boiling down, like what helps us live and access happiness is one is agency, and then the second one's gratitude, like just a regular practice of looking for things that you can be thankful for. So I was thinking about that through the lens of even this discussion of like as we're aging and hopefully encouraging the people that as you are thinking through your own process of getting older, like what are some of the worldviews that you could adopt or just choices you can make to like to notice your agency and to find gratitude more regularly.
Mm-hmm.
I think it can be easy to fall into the trap of I don't have a ton of power or I'm like this is unchangeable. So I think fighting through some of that is important, and then always looking for ways to be grateful. I think is obviously needs like same. But anyways, I found those interesting as I was thinking through aging. And I found myself coming back to my family and being thankful, like, hey, I was raised in an environment where I was taught like some of those principles. Not to say that I'm like an expert in those two things, but it's like those aren't foreign to me. Those aren't like those aren't ideas that are completely like new. Those are ones that I've heard before. I'm like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
well, how can I this year, now that I'm reflecting on my
Mhm.
next lap around the sun? How can I have agency to make, like, what choices can I make to make this year better and to put myself in a better spot, be a better dad, be a better husband in the future? Like, what choices can I make? I do have power. I'm not stuck. I like 39 doesn't have to be a repeat of 38. What can I do to live more intentionally? I'm like, okay, that's challenging and good for me. And then what do I need to be grateful for? Right? Whose shoulders am I standing on? What do I have? That's a privilege. How do I notice my privilege and then put that to use for others as opposed to just myself? Anyways, those are things that are coming to my brain from how do I reflect on and get better at this thing called adulting and aging.
Yeah, I think since COVID and the last like few years, I think honestly, like reading this book, I think I move differently in the world than I used to, um, in a lot of different ways. But in the one that I'm thinking of in particular is just noticing the earth and the world around me and being so grateful for it, especially because there's so much bad news. There's so many hard things that are out there that, like listening to waves crash on the beach and watching my daughter like do cartwheels in the sand. And I don't know, it sounds so cheesy, but like I'm walking through trees and I'm like, these trees have been alive for so long.
Right.
And what has changed around them, I can't even begin to imagine. I think just appreciating the tiny minuscule dot that I am, but that I exist in this world all around me. I can look around and see things that are like miraculous. And um, I don't know. I think I appreciate the way that that shifted in me, and I'm not sure entirely why or why I wasn't that way before. I think I did notice things before, but I just notice them more acutely, I feel like now. Just the miracles all around me of existence and beauty
Mhm.
and what we get to live in. And again, I recognize that it's it's also awful.
Right.
There's awful things happening all of the time, and I don't deny that either, but I think it makes the beautiful things more beautiful because I know it's not the only thing that exists.
Yeah, but you have to look for it, right? And I do feel though that so much of life is like what you look for, you'll find, right? So if you are in the that isn't to say that certain things aren't harder than others for sure, but like you choose to like embrace hardship as a gift and an opportunity to teach you, that's a different mentality than a different one, right? There's different types of worldviews that are going to help you um, thrive, I think, and I do think a general posture of gratitude and wonder for existence is going to help you
Mhm.
navigate the pain of life and the chaos and all the bad news, right? If you aren't if you don't have a practice, a gratitude practice or a wonder, like a choice to like walk through the woods and be like, wow, I can't believe I'm here, or feel your heartbeat. My heart's
Mhm.
beating today. If you have your health, just say, I'm so thankful I have my health today. Because
Mhm.
um like if you don't notice those things or have gratitude for those things, like you can get completely overwhelmed by all the shitty stuff, the crappy stuff of our world. There's way too much access to that now.
Mhm.
So anyways, I just think it's important. You have to kind of choose to live that way, right? You have to choose to look for those things because if you don't, like I think I don't know, the algorithms are going to naturally bring those up.
Yeah. And I think too, like I mentioned earlier, all that you've navigated through and experienced already, the wonder and the miracle that we're still here after, you know, everything that life has thrown at us already. And for many people, it's a lot. Life has
Yeah.
thrown you a couple of awful hands, and you're still here. And that experience can be used moving forward, even just as
Yeah.
a reminder that you're not in that now, or that you can survive the hard things that come your way. That kind of experience, I'm really thankful for.
Yeah. I was thinking about the Sasha Sagan book, and one of the quotes that she mentioned, and when it comes even in the context of birthdays and anniversaries, it reminded me of another book that I've read. I think I mentioned a couple times, but it's 4,000 Weeks, and
Mm.
it's kind of helping us view our life through a little bit more. Yeah, there it is. Time
Look, I
management
have
for mortals. It's good.
it.
I really like it, and it's reminding me of some of the Tim Urban stuff I've read too. For people that don't know who Tim Urban is, he has like the maps of like your life in weeks. I bought one of those. Like you're gonna be around 90 when you die, and here's all the weeks, and like you can kind of go through and be like, yes, join the planet on this week, right? Like my 11-year-old, like I can go through and kind of map out my life, so I'm gonna do that as one of my reflections or like takeaways from even having this discussion. But like seeing your life broken out into boxes of weeks or chunks of time, right? Kind of
Mhm.
messes with you a little bit. And one of the quotes from that time management for mortals is when you don't believe, when people stop believing in an afterlife, everything depends on making the most of this life. And I did think about that, how much it's changed for me in the past decade. Not to say that I wasn't like trying to live my life intentionally a decade ago, but I do think losing the belief that there's certainly something after this life has made me like a little bit more thoughtful on am I living my life well, right? Like if I get 4,000 weeks, like did I live this week intentionally with love, with gratitude? It's easier to notice the trees, I think, or notice the stars, or notice. I don't know when I have my four kiddos, right, and like whenever I interact with somebody who's a decade ahead of me, I'm like, what would you say? And I had this conversation just the other day. Like, what would you say to a 38-year-old you? Looking back, right? How old was your kid when you were 38? And like, my kid was 7. Okay, what would you say to yourself, right? And everybody always says the same thing. It goes so
Go
fast,
so fast. Hmm.
right? And like, I have one of my good friends from high school's kiddo is like they're in the midst of like going off to college and that experience, and like some of their own grief of like the challenge of like, did we nail the last 18 years? Because now we're just like pushing them out of the nest. And even if we aren't pushing them, they're walking out of the nest, right? They want to go. And like thinking, like trying to empathize with my future self of like, I'm going to feel really sad when my kids like shift out of this season, and trying to remind myself of that when I'm super annoyed with my kids, right? So like, I would love to be in that season where I miss my kids because they're just all around me right now. But anyways, I was just thinking about how important, how even in my own worldview, like having a less of a certainty about what's going to happen in the next life, certain for me is a huge motivator, or um, kind of just triggers a lot of thoughts. I'm like, okay, well, if this is it, am I living it well?
Make it count.
Make it count. Yeah.
I had COVID a couple weeks ago, and my family didn't get it, and so I isolated, which is different than the last time we had it. So I was by myself in my bedroom for like 5 days. Um, which
That's
at
a
first,
lot of Instagram.
um, and so, anyways, I did some reading and stuff like that, but I also binged, and someone suggested that I binge The Summer I Turned Pretty, um,
Mm,
like a teenage
yeah, I've
drama.
heard of it. I haven't seen it. Didn't show up in my algorithm, but
Maybe it will now that we've talked about this.
yeah,
Um,
probably will.
so forgive me, everybody, for teenage drama. But one of the things that I've been thinking about that was said on that show was, um, she says, remember, the world is happening to you, but you are also happening to the world. And so sad about Susanna, by the way. But I I think about that still, of like so much of our life we feel like is happening to us. And this I think goes back to your agency comment, but and my little like dot on the timeline that I felt like
Mhm.
that sometimes it can feel like we are so small, and that's accurate. We're so small in the scheme of things, and a lot of our life is spent reacting to the fact that the world is happening to us. And
Mm.
so much time and energy is spent, I think, on and rightly so, how we react to the world happening to us and around us. There is this moment of like, I'm also happening to the world right now. Like, this is it. This is my, 4,000 here. Like, what do I want it to be?
Mhm.
And I think it is a privilege to be like, ooh, I can think that way. But I do think there's a moment to really, and birthdays are a good one, to be like, am I happening to the world the way I want to?
Yeah.
And I don't think it needs to be like making my mark in like, certain ways where lots of people know who I am, or, anything like that. But like I'm not going to wait for things to happen to me. They're going to happen no matter what.
Yeah.
But I'm also not going to wait to make my mark on the world. And that right now is the world around me. And so
Yeah.
I will pick up the phone and call my friend and be like, how are you doing? I haven't talked to you in weeks. I'll send the text message. I'll write the card. I'll do these things to just remind myself, like, I'm happening to the world. I'm happening to the people around me. And
Yeah.
there's an honor and a privilege there. And I don't want to take it for granted.
Yeah. I want to live intentionally, right? I want to live this life the way I want to, not just kind of follow the path of least resistance, right? I think you do that well, by the way, just to compliment you. You wrote me a handwritten card, right? I've talked to you every week. We text, right?
That's
But
Isai for
you're,
you.
yeah, but it's a good thing though. It was like obviously a gesture that took you a couple minutes, but for me, I'm like, that's impressive. That's a very intentional and wonderful way to live. And it is I think that's required. You just have to, that requires more thought, more reflection on like, am I living the way I want to, right? And am I living out my values? What are my values now that I'm facing this next year? How do I want to live those out? I think that's really hopefully a trigger for even this discussion for people. I think we do that naturally, like at the early part of the year. There's all sorts of like, calendaring things. But I think birthdays, anniversaries, they're good. Right. If you're in a partnership, right? Or a partnership anniversary. All right, what do we want this next year to look like for us as partners, right? Thinking about that even with my own birthday, right? Like, all right, how do I want to live this year, and what needs to change as a result? Where do I have power to influence my scenario, my surroundings? I think that's the piece that I think is something that everybody can embrace. I do want to acknowledge that it can be hard. I'm not saying every birthday, like birthdays can be reminders of disappointments, right? Like, hey, I thought I'd be somewhere else when I was 39, or I thought I'd still be in my partnership when I turned this age, or I thought I would have kids, or I'd have this dream or this job or whatever. There is that. And so I think there's always going to be that like challenge to navigate some of the hardship of it all. But I think that's true for everybody though. I think some have, certainly people have greater challenges than other, but I think you can always live in that space of disappointment. So, but I think that maybe the challenge that I'm taking away from this discussion is, yes, like grieve that and acknowledge that, and like you can give energy to that, but also give energy to things that you can change and ways you do want to live, and gratitude for what you have. Because I think if you only give energy to the things that are challenging about the scenario, I just think it's a harder way to live. Like you have to at least give energy to both,
I think so too. The last thing I have written down was I was going through Instagram the other day because I like to go back and look at my life. I like to go back and look at my kids and remember. It helps me remember moments. And I came across the picture of my grandpa that I posted when he passed away. My grandpa was 99. And I had recalled a story. Well, all my grandparents lived to their 90s. My grandma was 100.
Not going anywhere, KB.
I know.
You're not going anywhere.
We'll see. but I wrote about how it was challenging at the end, it's not as easy to move around when you're 99, and things had been difficult. And I remember asking him how his week had been, and he said, when you get to be my age, they're all good days. And again, acknowledging like that's not the case for everyone, but I appreciate the perspective that he had in his 90s of being able to look back and to say, it's hard right now. I know I'm reaching the end, but it's still a good day.
Yeah.
And I'm thankful for
that's
that.
like a value though. Like that's a value that he embraced, right?
Yeah.
Because he could have focused on the chronic pain or all the things that he couldn't have done that he used to be able to do in his 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s or whatever, right? Like you have to choose that. That is a worldview that he adopted that is admirable. And like the hope, like how do I live in a way right now where I can embrace that when I'm that age,
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Any other comments you have for birthday, aging? You don't seem to be going gray. You going
A little bit
on the side?
Just a little bit. Yeah, a little bit. I get my hair cut regularly enough where it looks kind of blonde. So people are like, oh, is he kind of just blonde or is he gray? So no, I like this discussion. I feel like my biggest takeaways continue to revolve around using these birthdays as a reflection to live more intentionally, to not let them be a ritual. I don't want my birthday to be a ritual of like a trigger for what could have been or what should have been, like all the coulds and shoulds. I think birthdays can be a trigger for that. And I'm choosing to like not spend my birthday thinking about, if I had made this choice, I could be in a way better spot on my day, right? I think we can live that way all the time, but to let it be a day where I'm like, okay, reflecting on what do I have to be grateful for. I have a little notes app on my phone because it's called my PMG Live Intentionally note, and I have like little quotes written down and things that remind me like, okay, how can I live intentionally? And so I'm reviewing that. One of the quotes, I have like little quotes that inspire me, but one of the quotes is, happiness is a function of the number of deep and meaningful relationships I have. So like trying to just keep pushing relationships to the top of my values pyramid. So I think what I'm trying to do with this birthday is reflect on, okay, what are my values and like, how do I want to live? And gratitude, like recognizing all the gifts that I've been given, all the privileges that I have, and not letting those be, you ever heard the phrase that yesterday's raise is tomorrow's expectation, right? So whenever like or if you've ever been in a job, right, and you get like maybe a little cost of living increase, right? Yesterday's raise was like, oh my God, I got a raise this today. Now it's like, of course I'm owed that, right? It's like I'm trying to stay out of that mentality that all the things that I've been given, I want to like notice all of them, right? And not not to get caught up in like, of course I've owed that. So even like what you're saying earlier about I'm the sixth kid, right? I'm here, like don't forget to notice that, because if you lose that, I think it can be, you miss out on a lot of wonder and a lot of gratitude. So those are my reflections.
Well, I do think you're one of the most intentional people that I have in my life. I feel like you're doing really well at that. I feel like the decisions you make, the way you spend your time, the people that you choose to surround yourself with are all very intentional and leading you somewhere good. So I'm glad to be a part of it.
You're on the list with McKV. You're stuck. You're stuck with me. Thanks for chatting today.
I hope you have a great birthday. I hope you get to pick your dinner after golf and blow out some candles and think about your next trip around the sun.
I love it.
Happy birthday.
Thanks, Gaby.
Thank you for joining us. To make a donation, head to eastlakecc.com/donate.